Golden State Media Concepts Sci-Fi Podcast. Together we dive into the world of sci-fi and science fiction. From episodes of Star Trek, Star Wars, to The Walking Dead, Resident Evil, all the hot new science fiction movies from the backdoors of Marvel or DC. The Golden State Media Concepts Sci-Fi Podcast. You'll never look at science fiction the same way again.
Hello and welcome to the Golden State Media Concepts Sci-Fi Podcast. I'm Shane Northrup, mixer and producer here at Golden State Media, and we're bringing you the best of science fiction. Stick around.
In these films and television shows, the first one I want to go into, is I want to talk about the utopian society. And everybody's got a favorite. They've been making films about the utopian Earth of the future, when there's no more war, there's no more disease, there's no more any of that stuff, and everything's perfect. Or is it? Now, a lot of the famous ones that are involved in these particular utopian films, there's a couple different angles they go with as far as what is it that's going to ultimately destroy the utopian society. In science fiction, a utopian society exists only to be drugged down. It never survives the actual story. The first one that has made some pretty good films, there's the utopian society that has some type of resistance or outcast or underground or some type of system that's trying to fight against the great society that is their utopia. And some of those films will have the government either doing something that isn't really cool, it's morally objectionable. You look at something like Soylent Green, well, there's not really a resistance effort. It's a full utopian society. Everybody's getting along, but they don't know how the sausage is made. And of course, if you haven't seen it or know the line at the end, Soylent Green, it's people. Yeah, that's what they've been doing this whole time. The people don't know how the sausage is made. Then they find out, ruins everything, okay? Another one, Logan's Run, is another one of those. It's a very kind of Brave New World-y type situation. Another one you can get into, a fairly new one, is on The 100. It's a television show. It's on the CW. I catch it on Hulu, is where I watch it at. Second season of the show. The show revolves around, it's post-apocalyptic. At first, in nature, it's post-apocalyptic. But they find this society living in a mountain that is utopian. Everything seems perfect, as it always does. And then they find out that the ruling class is doing something naughty, and then they go and tear the whole world down. So the utopian films are interesting. It's always trying to raise a point, usually about the society that you're living in and what it takes to be living in peace. What does it take to remove aggression and war and all of these other things that would otherwise have crumbled society? Because most of these films and most of the television shows that involve utopian societies are all recognizing something that either A, had destroyed society or was about to destroy society, and then they had to clean it up. Then there's the standout. There's the one that defies all of those, and that's Star Trek. If you think about one of the brilliant things that Star Trek does, is it offers you a future Earth that is a utopia with no BS. There's no baggage. There's no underground intent on destroying what the Federation has built. They used alien contact to unify the Earth, to be regardless of what nation you're from, what race you are, what sex or gender you are. It was a unifier. And the show doesn't really do much about Earth in and of itself. You just are always believing that on Earth there's no money, nobody's poor, nobody's starving, everybody's good, and there's no attempt to thwart that. Essentially, Star Trek in and of itself is a series about foreign relations and trying to bring people into the fold and getting them on board with what the Federation does. But when it looks into what Earth is doing, it's all very positive. It's a very positive future. They want to bring people into that kind of society because finally it's worked out for everyone. And even Star Trek, to a certain point, which you find out in First Contact, is a little bit post-apocalyptic. There was another great war. It's another one of those situations where what are we ultimately going to do to stave off extinction of humanity? And the most brilliant thing about it is they decided to look to the skies. They went into space. They were doing something that like in 1950s, 60s American society really brought this country together, which was explore what's out there, to give people a vision of something that they can dream about or aspire to. And Star Trek brilliantly brings in a utopian society without giving it the immoral baggage, without giving that ulterior motive of really seeking power through control. It's something that no other thing has duplicated, and honestly, I don't believe, because of the cynicism that exists anymore, no one will duplicate. If they want to go to that type of society, they are always going to go back to the original one that did it, and that is Star Trek. And that's why we're seeing the continuation of the film franchise, even going back to some of the original members of the crew. And now we're going to see another Star Trek series come out. I think it's going to be on CBS, ABC, something like that. They're getting new crews. They want to make it the old, like, Kirk days. I don't think it's going to be further into the future, past where Voyager was at. But they're going to continue on with that. So that's always one thing in the midst of the Soylent Green and the Logan's Run and the Demolition Man and Equilibrium and all those ones, there's Star Trek that stands out above the rest. And I think that's awesome. You may be thinking, well, in the world of science fiction, what's love got to do with it, as Tina would say? But a lot of things. It's not necessarily love being the theme, but really talking about the things that make for the lover's story and the lover's conflict. Again, as we're going to continually discuss on the show, that the wrapping in science fiction, or wrapping it up in the future, or time travel, or the mind bender, the absurdity, is really just for the sake of being a device that helps tell the story. And it may be a story you've seen a million times before, but that's why it is that they wrap it up in such a different exterior. So the first one that we are going to talk about here today has to deal with the love story involving time travel. And we talked about time travel a little bit in general, about the different types of time travel flicks have been out there. But this is about a love story that happens to be mixed in with time travel. One of those that goes in with that being the time traveler's wife, Eric Bana, Rachel McAdams, both of them brilliant. Rachel McAdams is really one of those actresses that I find she fits with a certain type, as in you would want to go after Rachel McAdams for a certain kind of role. She's not, and in my view, a lot of these actresses being interchangeable, she is someone that you want to go after to get a kind of strength and vulnerability, but as well as a good intelligence, emotional intelligence. And I mean, and she's beautiful. I mean, she's Hollywood good looking and everything, but she still gives that quality of being somewhat down to earth and being somewhat approachable, and therefore everybody can get behind her. And you like her because of the character she's portraying, not just because she's nice to look at. So the time traveler's wife really dealing with it, and they bring the time travel part of it as being something biological. Now, there's always different kinds of devices as to what enables time travel, whether it's walking through a door that happens to be a portal, if you go a certain speed. If you're Superman, you can just go around the world backwards fast enough to turn time backwards. But with the time traveler's wife, it's basically a genetic defect that Eric Bana possesses, and it goes through the story of their relationship and inserting him doing these different time periods, and it's one that shows almost in a cyclical sense that the time travel has affected him and his life and their relationship really at every point, and she gets incredibly wise to it and how to know at what points he'll be showing up, because he ends up really being going back in time and forward in time and back in time enough that he's been in her childhood, and this is after they've been together for years. So there's a very cyclical type theme that is going on with it, but it's not that hard to follow. And they have a kid that can control it and go not only back in time to her life, but back in time to other periods too, because there's a thing with Eric Bana's character is he can only go into times where he existed. He can't, go back 100 years or 1,000 years or anything. But they dress it up. It's the time travel portion of it really is just a way to bring about a conflict of a relationship, basically when somebody is doomed. And if I can liken it to something, if you recall the flick, was it A Walk to Remember? I know it's a bit mushy and adolescent to talk about, but in that one, there is an aspect of doom because Mandy Moore's character is sick, and there has to be the trial of that love in the face of this, and it's something that the partner has to accept. Just as Rachel McAdams' character has accepted the defect and accepted the problem that Eric Bana's character possesses, he's very self-conscious about it. He's very doom and gloom about it because he can almost know when he's going to die. There's a futile nature to his character, although he can't stop himself from loving her. And it's one of those where, although he is the interesting character because he can go through time, that she has to have the strength to deal with his emotions and to deal with the type of turmoil that the relationship can go through on both of their sides simply because this thing exists.
This has been the Golden State Media Concepts Sci-Fi Podcast. Best of. Stick around for more.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Hey everyone, and welcome. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Sci-Fi Podcast. This is Drew hanging out here with you today. Now first, I wanted to jump in and get into something. This had just been reported out here on the interwebs in the last day or two, and it's a subject that is very close to my heart, and that is the words of John McTiernan. If the name is not familiar to you, let me just fill you in on who that is. He mostly is noted for directing the first and third Die Hard films. He also did Predator and a couple of other ones. So he's not unfamiliar with the world of science fiction, not unfamiliar with action, and he's taken it upon himself when promoting a new film of his to specifically target that of Captain America. And the properties that Marvel has come out with concerning the Chris Evans character of Captain America. And this is what he said. So I'm doing a direct quote here. He says, quote, "I hate the majority of major studio films for political reasons. I can't really watch them. I'm annoyed the second they start. Captain America, I'm not joking. The cult of American hypermasculinity is one of the worst things to have happened in the world during the last 50 years. Hundreds of thousands of people have died because of this idiotic delusion. How is it possible to watch a film called Captain America? They're all making comic book adaptations. There's action but no human beings. They're films made by fascists. They're making all the kids in the world think they'll never be important enough to have a film made about their life. And it's a unique moment in the history of cinema. It didn't used to be like this. A kid used to be able to learn how a man or a woman should act by watching films. Morals. Comics make heroes for businesses." End quote. This is John McTiernan, director of Die Hard, which is a quintessential machismo film talking about hypermasculinity, which it's one of those buzzwords, and he goes on to use another one here by saying fascist. So the director of Die Hard, where one man kills a bunch of people en masse throughout the film and has no character arc whatsoever. He's just as brash, almost just as insensitive at the end of the film as he starts. And trust me, I love Die Hard. It's my favorite Christmas movie. But if you think that your life is going to be as interesting as John McClane's, you got another thing coming. No one's life is as interesting as John McClane's. And that's another thing. It makes people believe that they'll never be important enough to have a film made about them. There are biopics being made more often than any other time right now. And I'm sorry, but most people's lives aren't interesting enough to have a movie made about them. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But to attack Captain America, and by the way, he says, watch a movie called Captain America and talk about hypermasculinity. What does Captain America have to do, just in the name, with hypermasculinity? Now, you can argue jingoism or nationalism, sure, but masculinity, I just don't understand. And when he says, and I also question in reading this whether he's even watched any of the Captain America movies. Because if you want to say that these are films that have action but no human beings, if he even knows the origin of Captain America, let's just go through the first one, First Avenger. Steve Rogers is not that guy. Steve Rogers is a sickly, underweight, poor kid from the Bronx who has repeatedly tried to get into the military to serve during World War II. And at one point in the movie, he tells his best friend, Bucky Barnes, when he's asked why he keeps trying, because he says that other men are dying out there and I shouldn't be here cowering, I should be out there, and I should be just another one of those guys doing what he can to help. Does that sound inhuman? And by the way, he's not picked to be a super soldier because he wants to go kill Nazis, because he believes in American power. He's not picked because he's a meathead, great soldier that will just follow orders. He's picked because he has heart. He's picked because he has respect for life. He is picked because he is a person that wants to do good. Does that sound inhuman? Is that hypermasculine to you? And then in the next film, he finds out that the people that he's been working for has been infiltrated by the bad guys, that Hydra has taken over S.H.I.E.L.D. And at one point in the movie, when he goes on the intercom and says, I don't know how many of them there are, but they're about to do something very terrible, and I'm going to stop them, and I need your help. And he says, the price of freedom is high, but it's a price I'm willing to pay. Is that inhuman? Is that not a human being? He surrounds himself with these people. With either of the Carters, Peggy or her great grandniece or whatever, with Natasha Romanoff, with Hawkeye, with Sam Wilson. They don't possess powers. They're humans. And then in the third one, in Civil War, where he says that I don't want my team to be controlled by the government. And he has a legitimate, intellectual, moral, as McTiernan wants to point out is vacant in these movies, has a moral standoff with Tony Stark and his supporters. Has he watched the movies, is what I'm asking. He may look at the title and moan about it, but has he actually gone in and seen the content of these films? Because there's a part in it, and this is again, this is from Civil War, and this is what he says, because I don't want to summarize it here. Where Steve says, Tony Stark says, we're not. Who said we're giving up? And Captain America says, we are, if we're not taking responsibility for our actions. This document shifts the blame. And Rhodey responds, sorry, Steve, that is dangerously arrogant. This is the United Nations we're talking about. It's not the World Security Council. It's not S.H.I.E.L.D. It's not Hydra. And Captain America says, no, but it's run by people with agendas, and agendas change. This is an argument that has human beings discussing and arguing, but there's heart behind it. There's a brain behind it. It's not terrorists come into Nakatomi Plaza and John McClane shoots them up. Tony also goes on to say, what if this panel sends us somewhere we don't think we should go? What if there's somewhere we need to go and they don't let us? We may not be perfect, but the safest hands are still our own. That's human. It's not an arrogant remark on this guy who thinks that he knows best for everybody in the world. He just wants to keep his own conscience clean when it comes to these things. And you want to talk about the Civil War. The whole backdrop of the film is based in this damage that has been caused by the Avengers in countries around the world where they were not asked to go. There is humanity there. The lady that approaches Tony Stark after the MIT Expo shows the picture, and he holds that picture. That's his entire motivation for wanting to sign the Sokovia Accords, is because of a boy that we never had seen before. But through the process of making this film, they brought in we really need something to ring true and bring this out. And what's it going to be? It's going to be the cost of human life. None of that is ever addressed in any Die Hard movie at any point. Not addressed in Predator. Nothing that McTiernan's been involved in. And he wants to argue that Captain America is the height of hypermasculinity. And by the way, in a nation that's fairly hypo-masculine, where is that? Where is the masculinity? And is what Captain America portrays, is it too much? I got to tell you, I learned a lot from Captain America, as I've learned a lot from Batman and Superman and all these other superheroes. Look, I understand I can't be physically Captain America because that was all contained in a bottle, but I can be a man like Captain America. I can be a superhuman like Captain America. But these things that he stands for and his devotion to them, I just don't get. I don't see the hypermasculinity in it. Whoa, hey there, meathead. I know you're saying this is really about this, but what you're really trying to say is you need to work on your tan and go, hit on girls at the club or whatever he views as hypermasculinity. It's ridiculous.
We're coming up on a break here. Stick around for more of the best of the Golden State Media Concepts Sci-Fi podcast.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines, they got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Hey, everybody, we are back to the Golden State Media Concepts Sci-Fi Podcast. We are talking about invasions in honor of Independence Day Resurgence coming out here this Friday. It's always fun to see the same concept being the invasion of Earth from alien forces, but packaged in different ways. Some of them very outright, stuff like Mars Attacks, where it just comes like, hey, we're the aliens and we're just here to wreck everything. But it's global. It's an announcement to the world. And others do the invasion in a little bit different of a sense. So we're talking about the assuming form of people. We're talking about the invasion of the body snatchers. We're talking about They Live. We're talking about something like The Faculty, where the alien presence is seemingly small. Like it's just like this, it's this parasitic type thing. And recently, Halle Berry just had a show on. It didn't get picked up for another season called Extant, where it's a spore-like alien life that is able to get into people and it can manipulate people. The idea of the alien making their way through and physically incapable of dominating, so the strengths of this alien is the ability to assume these other physical forms, which is usually to inhabit the body of another person or to control the mind and stuff like that. It's another fine example of natural selection, isn't it? It's an evolution of, something that if we were to see it, it just looks like a parasite, but it has the ability to get in your mind. It has the ability to tinker around. And there's the invasion aspect of it, usually in these films, are centered around a small locality. And it starts somewhere. It starts in a small town. And then it's supposed to grow and grow and grow. But ultimately, if the hero's doing their job, it never makes it past the city limits or even to the next county, if that's the case. So this aspect of the invasion is intriguing because it's usually a faceless enemy. Right? So we're talking about invasion of the body snatchers of the Faculty. We're talking about things that we can see what the person looks like when they're inhabited. We can see the change in them. But when it comes to the actual alien presence itself, it can be a little bit underwhelming, or they never actually show it. They just, usually their motivations get discovered and stuff like that. And we end up finding out a little bit more about it. But it's not this little green men type situation that we see in other invasion flicks. So those ones are usually pretty interesting. It's usually not the action type science fiction. It's usually the thriller horror type that they end up doing these particular invasion flicks with. It really just manipulating people. One show, again, unfortunately didn't get picked up for another season, as well as Under the Dome. I don't know if any of you guys were catching that, but that's another quasi invasion flick where it's, again, small town, small locality, where this alien presence puts a dome around this town and it's impenetrable. And it's basically used as a bit of an ant farm, a bit of light fun, almost like kept as pets and stuff that these aliens have. And it's always the case. I mean, if there would be no movie, there would be no TV series if we came across alien life and it was just dumb and it was just ill-equipped and stupid, and we just kind of looked at it and fight on it. I mean, there are some that come across where they're not as intelligent, but they're physically more dominating. There are some of those that do that, but the main thing is we're always going to be outmatched in some way, and then the invasion by way of control of human beings themselves it raises a better question because they're having to not only defeat an alien, but they're also trying to preserve the person that they're inhabiting. So it works twofold. It's not just a battle between the two, most powerful weapons that these things can come across. We're trying to maintain a life while getting the poison out, getting the evil out of them. So those are really fun to watch if you're wanting to have a good scare, or if you're wanting to see, a bit of acting chops have to come through where they have to pretend to be, something else. The Faculty was one, and in the 90s there were a lot of terror and horror and suspense films and stuff that came out like that, and like Final Destination kind of around the same time. But The Faculty had an awesome soundtrack and really brought out Josh Hartnett. That was like sort of his breakout role, was in The Faculty, and it was just fun. I mean, it's interesting the imagery that you can maintain with that when you see people doing things that aren't normally, and I think of something like The Happening, which is not an invasion flick in and of itself. I mean, it might have been. I've honestly, coming out, I've really no idea. Well, I guess it was the plant life. Like the plant life responded. But the imagery that comes about when mankind is under control in these giant waves, it creates something very stirring, and it creates something very kind of haunting that obviously is a big coordinated effort to shoot. But when you look at it, and if you're involved and you suspend that disbelief, what they're able to do to make it seem like, all of these people are possessed and everything else like that, it creates for a fun time. Could be a scary time, but mostly it's a fun time. They immediately got J.J. Abrams, who had just relaunched Star Trek, to come in and make this Star Wars film. And everyone was excited. Everyone was excited. Finally, there's no prequels. It's back to the story after the existence of Luke Skywalker and the destruction of the Death Star. It takes place afterwards. Compounded the excitement with the return of Harrison Ford and Carrie Fisher and Mark Hamill. They were bringing him back. And then when the trailer first came out, I must have watched that thing 100 times. It was blowing up. So the day comes where it's released. Or let's backtrack a little bit. Before the film was released, I was with my daughter and we watched episodes 4, 5, and 6. I didn't really find it important to watch the prequels. We watched 4, 5, and 6, and I tried to get her on board. But I understand, there's a bit of nuance when it comes to episode 5. I know when I was a kid, Empire Strikes Back was not my favorite. It was kind of slow, a little dark. So I knew she wasn't going to be all enthralled. But I thought, once it comes around to watch Jedi, she'll love it because of the Ewoks and all this other stuff. So she had, a little bit of interest. But we went to go see episode 7. We went to go see The Force Awakens. And as I'm watching the film, because they didn't really give this away in the previews, we come to find that this story, or this new trilogy, as far as the Force Awakening and who it affects, is related to Rey, the girl. And she's the Force-sensitive one. Now, if you go back and you watch the trailers and you watch the previews, only Finn is shown wielding that lightsaber. You never see Rey with it. So I had only to assume when this whole thing kicked off, okay, there's a stormtrooper that's Force sensitive, and that ended up not being the case. But I had no problem with that. This is not like recasting parts that already existed and replacing them of a person with a different gender or ethnicity or anything else. This was backed by a legacy that we can follow this girl to ultimately her saga and her story of finding Luke and learning to use the Force. And my daughter loved it. She loved Rey. This was a lead who was compassionate, who was strong, who was intelligent, who was tough, who had the Force But that wasn't the coolest thing. The coolest thing is she's the new captain of the Millennium Falcon. That's the coolest thing about her. So her love of this character made me excited. I'm glad that she liked Star Wars in some vein, okay? Maybe she wasn't as interested in Luke Skywalker as I was, or Han Solo as I was. But she found a character in this new franchise that she could enjoy, and it was the lead. This is her story. So, trying to capitalize on that new love, I'm like, okay, Disney has never been one to fall short on merchandise. Certainly, this is Star Wars, one of the most brand recognizable things out there. There's Star Wars on anything you can possibly find. This character is going to blow up. This character is going to be huge. No. The amount of product available for Rey, the character, is dismally lacking. There's no doll. Any action figure you try to find of this character comes coupled with either BB-8 or Finn. You have to buy them as a twofer. You're not finding these in the girls' toy section. You're barely finding anything in the boys' toy section. This is the lead. This is the lead of this new series. This is her story. I can find tons of crap of Boba Fett. I can find tons of Finn stuff. Tons of Poe Dameron, which I found out in the special features wasn't even supposed to live through the first movie. That's all available. Kylo Ren, yeah, go nuts. You can find it. You can find a plush toy, makes them look cute. But Rey, the lead, this awesome example of independence and intelligence and strength, wasn't princess-like, came from nothing, lived in the desert. Nope, hardly nothing. There's maybe 3 t-shirts designed that are awful. The toys are lacking. No other product to support this character. And there's a market for it here. And what's the reasoning? What is the reasoning for this? Because I got to tell you something. Not only is this new series about this girl, but the very next Star Wars film that comes out, Rogue One, also a female lead. Disney buys this. They kick off this new saga with 2 films, 2 female leads. And where's the love? Where's the love for her? Why can't I find anything to get for my girl? There's a market for it. It exists. Are they afraid that we're going to lose interest in this? That they're going to be more popular than the Disney princesses? Well, I say good. I'm happy with that. We're finally getting an audience that can say definitively, this is not a supporting character. This girl is the lead. The boys' club window is broken. And Disney will not commit to giving that product to show that support. Where's it at, Disney? Give us more. Please. For my girl's sake.
This has been the Golden State Media Concepts Science Fiction Podcast. For more, find us on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher, and GoldenStateMediaConcepts.com. Thank you, and have a good night.